this will be the best coaching that he will see from an offensive standpoint in his young career. I'm really excited about the pairing here with Kubiak and JSN.
In the back half of the year, he was the most efficient receiver against man coverage, 4.96 yards per route run. He put it in the box score against man coverage. And like I said, he ended up being the breakout receiver of 2024.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
May be the greatest catch I've ever seen.
Let's talk about JSN here. Jaxon Smith-Njigba. 17 games. He had 16 starts versus 9 starts as a rookie. Ended up with 137 targets, 100 catch season for JSN, 1,130 yards, and 6 touchdowns with a very impressive 73% catch rate. There were times, Matt, where I felt like JSN and Geno were just so in sync and just dang near unstoppable at times, at various points in this season. When they got into a groove, watch out. They were really, really tough to beat. But I will say this, really interesting route tree from JSN. We don't talk about route participation a ton on this show, but damn, JSN ran a wide variety of routes, 5 different routes, Matt, with double-digit route participation, almost 6 if you're including 9% route participation on that coveted flat route of yours. But again, nearly 6 different routes with double-digit route participation. I know we're knee deep into RP numbers, but let me just tell the folks out there, that doesn't happen that often. I mean, Puka, for example, had 3 routes where he had more than 10% route participation. He had 20% route participation on the slant. JSN had 0 routes with 18+% route participation. Man, they moved this guy all around the football field. And I don't want to say moved him around the formation because he played mostly in the slot, but they asked him to do so many different things in that Seattle offense.
It's a great point. And just brass tacks too, among all those routes that were, let's just call it above 9% in terms of his route percentage, like how often he ran that route.
Yeah.
Only one of them was he below the NFL average, which was the curl route where he was at 69.2%. Every other route, he was very, very good on the routes that he was asked to run. He was good on routes he wasn't asked to run all that often, as well, which really the only 2 routes that are below the NFL average in terms of like the rate of how often he's running them is actually the 9, which he's not very good on, and the slant, which he is very good on. I'm hoping to see more like quick in breakers this year for Jaxon Smith-Njigba because like just if you're doing the top view down on JSN in 2020 in 2024, he was the breakout receiver of last year. Because I mean, like fantasy is not everything, but it gives you a good sort of view of number one, just how productive they were, but also like preseason expectations. This guy was drafted outside the top 40 receivers in fantasy last year. Right. Outside the top 40, he finished as wide receiver 10. And, we talked about this a lot with his rookie season profile. He was somebody that, people were kind of disappointed by in his rookie season because, he was low yards per route run, low targets per route run, stuff like that. But that was all because he was playing alongside 2 guys in Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, who were not just good players, but they were like, Lockett certainly is like a Seahawks icon. Metcalf is an established player for this team. They were like, they had years baked in with the quarterback. They had years baked in with the franchise. You don't just come in and like, right away as a rookie, usurp those guys. Well, in year 2, that's exactly what he did. It's like, okay, all that bullshit stats from his rookie season doesn't matter. It wasn't descriptive of the player. What was descriptive of the player was his talent, which he did flash in his rookie season reception perception profile. 72% success rate versus man, 81.5% against zone as a rookie. Showed he could win in isolation. It kind of took this Ryan Grubb coaching staff a little bit of time to actually figure out, like, no, this is our best receiver, and the offense will run smoother when we run it through this guy. But when they did, then he took off. In the back half of the year, he was the most efficient receiver against man coverage, 4.96 yards per route run. He put it in the box score against man coverage. And like I said, he ended up being the breakout receiver of 2024.
Well, and again, too, keep in mind, this will be his third offensive coordinator that he has had in his very short career, right? His rookie season, we're talking about a guy that was playing under Pete Carroll and Shane Waldron, right? Then Mike McDonald comes in with Ryan Grubb last year. Then now we make another offensive coordinator change here. I am extremely excited about what we might see here from Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator for Seattle. I certainly had my doubts about Ryan Grubb and obviously Mike McDonald.
Yeah, you were right.
In the end,
yeah, you were so right.
Ryan Grubb as well. But no, I am so high on Clint Kubiak. And I know what people are going to be saying is like, oh, well, Clint, come on, man. Like New Orleans wasn't that good last year. Yeah. Okay. Well, dude, I mean, Armageddon hit their injury reports. You know what I mean? Like, you really can't.
They're really good in those first two games.
Ooh, let me tell you, those first couple games were super exciting. That's the kind of game planning that I'm hoping we find here in the Pacific Northwest here in 2025. I think that Jaxon Smith-Njigba has a real opportunity. I know he had the breakout 1,100-yard season last year, but I think we see, again, another at a minimum 1,100 yards. Again, he's got to stay healthy, obviously, but man, I don't see why this guy can't push 1,300. I don't see why he can't push, double-digit touchdowns. Because what he has done over the first, couple of seasons in his NFL career has been really, really good. And I think this will be the best coaching that he will see from an offensive standpoint in his young career. I'm really excited about the pairing here with Kubiak and JSN.
You know what, too, as you're talking about these two coaches, one being Shane Waldron. I think we all know what we feel about Shane Waldron in terms of being an offensive coordinator at this point. And then obviously Ryan Grubb. I mean, that unit was just a disaster last year. It was just a disaster. It was very, you were so right about this. I was like, I'm intrigued by the Ryan Grubb hire. And you're like, I think it's going to go awful. And I was wrong to be intrigued and you were right to be suspicious. So let's just put it there. Those two guys, neither one of them, I think, has what it takes to be an offensive coordinator in the NFL. But what's funny? I'm looking at the route charts from year 1 to year 2. They're actually not that different. Cause I think the first thing that people will say is, oh, well, Shane Waldron, they got his, because he's like the most hated person he's become the most hated person on fantasy Twitter, taking over from Arthur Smith. Maybe, I don't know. Everybody on fantasy,
that far. I want to go that
yeah,
far.
I don't know, but everybody on Twitter thinks that Shane Waldron is an idiot.
Yeah,
they think he's not even just bad. They think he's like completely clueless, which I think is like, we're always a little harsher on these guys than we need to.
It
be.
is. Yeah, no, that's harsh.
But like, oh yeah, they got the Ryan Grubb at least got the deployment right for Jason. Dude, it's literally the same route tree. All they did was just throw him the football. Like all they did was just throw him the football and make him like, hey, this corner route, this out route for JSN from the slot, we're going to throw that as opposed to we're going to just lock in on DK Metcalf or we're going to, whatever. So that's all you look at the route chart from year 1 to the route chart to year 2. It's pretty much like ballpark the same stuff. They just threw the guy the football, which is what they should have done in his rookie season to boost up those per route stats and things of that nature. Just throw him the football because the guy is open. The guy's a really, really, really good separator. And that's why I'm with you that we have some questions. We'll talk about the deployment stuff for JSN here in a second, but he's such a good route runner. And like your point about the balanced nature of his route tree is a good one because he just is a really good technician. I think he just has a good sense of how to set routes up. Even before that breakout in the middle portion to back half of the year, you saw him just being able to set these routes up against man coverage. 81st percentile success rate versus man, at 75% success rate in his second season. Super promising number. He's over 70% against press. Like, the guy's just a really good route runner, and he's been a good route runner, and he's been a good man coverage beater throughout his entire time being studied by reception perception. He was also at 75% in his collegiate prospect profile. He was at 72% as a rookie. We've got a long history now, 3 seasons, college, rookie, second year in the NFL, of him being a good man coverage beater. Like, the proof has been in the pudding for a minute now, is what I wrote about him being able to beat man coverage.
Areas of improvement for JSN. Big improvement on the slant route, which you'd love to see, right? 73% success rate the year prior, and then in 2024, 81.5% success rate, and 8% increase for JSN on the slant route. Again, if you're going to be working out of that slot, you got to see that, man. You got to see that above 80%, and that's certainly what we saw here in year number 2 for JSN. And then again, you talk about huge improvement on the corner route, 46% success rate in 2023, nearly 72% in 2024. I'm sure route participation had a lot to do with that, but the bottom line is he ran this route a lot. I mean, it's not a ton in regards to, in relation to, a slant route or something like that, but 10.5% route participation on the corner route. Again, let me put this in context, folks. Historically, I have it as the 3rd highest corner route participation in reception perception history. You just don't run that many corners. And again, I know that the corner route is a beautiful cover 2 beater when run properly. And we know that the cover 2 has become a dominant, defense in the NFL. So I don't know, for me, you get over 70% on the corner route at 10.5% route participation. That is something to certainly raise an eyebrow at, and something that we should take very seriously too.
Yeah, other guys that are in that neighborhood in terms of like 10% corner route rates, like Tyreek Hill in 2020, like George Pickens in 2023. And then you've got JSN like running all these corner routes, and and Jameson Williams in 2023 is at the most corner routes I've ever charted at 11%. But dude, Deshaun Jackson 2016 is at 9.7%. Like, wow. One of these things doesn't theoretically look like the other in Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I've got a Sterling Shepard season in here too. I guess I should probably, in fairness, say like, yes, Sterling Shepard's up here as well. But we're talking about a lot of like downfield wideouts, and then JSN, who I think is viewed by most people as kind of a pop gun slot receiver or like a compiler slot receiver. But man, he really affects the game downfield. And I think that 71.9% success rate on corners and the 83.3% success rate on out routes, which he did run at a pretty decent volume at 7.8% of his routes. That's really where, like, go back and watch that Rams game, which I think was his first, like, this is when people were starting to be like, oh, JSN he is who he is, like in the middle of his second season. Like maybe we just need to, people were calling him like Jaxon Njigba on Twitter, like literally in the first half of that game. And then he goes off and has this monster eruption game. I think it was like week 11, week 9, something like that against the Rams. And that from then on, he just went on a tear, but like so many deep, like outbreaking routes where Geno Smith, and this is, Sam Darnold to Geno Smith, we'll see with the quarterback transition, but Geno has no problem letting those things rip. And he was really letting rip those deep outbreaking routes. And that to me is where JSN can really go far down that slot receiver archetype, not just being like a compiler in the short to intermediate area, but he can be really a guy that affects like downfield, particularly on those 2 routes, corners and outs.
Okay, so again, we're talking about a slot receiver here, but over 75% success rate versus man coverage, which is really, really good. If you're new, you want to be over 70%. To be over 75%, we're really starting to, we're cooking with gas now. We'd like him to be over 80% versus zone. He has 79. Again, it's a little bit strange considering his role on this offense, but I think that's 79% obviously is good. It's fine. We're working with that.
It was 81.5 as a rookie. So like, that's, we're in this kind of the same ballpark.
We're in that same ballpark. We're good, man. And by the way, I do think that Kubiak will have him run a more concentrated route tree.
You're
Just do
probably
the
right
things
about
that he
that.
does better, and run those more. We love the varied nature of his routes, but let's chill a little bit here, okay? let's get to, like, I don't know, like 18%, 19% slant route participation. Let's get some more layup routes. Let's get some things that he does really, really well, and just hammer defenses with those things. I think we'll see a little bit more of that from Clint Kubiak. And finally, 72% success rate versus press coverage. We want that over 70% again. And for a guy who is not the biggest dude in the world, playing mostly out of the slot, I think those are very, very encouraging numbers. I think JSN had a fantastic 2024. Really excited to see where he goes in 2025. But that's the big question. What happens in 2025, Matt? Because they bring in Cooper Kupp, they've got this offensive coordinator change, and most importantly, they made a huge quarterback change going from Geno Smith to Sam Darnold. Where does JSN fall in 2025? Do you think his skills mesh? Will it mesh enough with Sam Darnold? And can this guy play on the outside? I think that's the biggest question. There's already reports saying that he's playing a lot more outside, a lot more out perimeter type of stuff. Cooper Kupp in the fold. He's going to play primarily, almost exclusively in the slot.
Yeah, because I think when you look at Cooper Kupp's reception perception profile at this point, he has to be like a slot player.
Right.
He has, that is how you're going to best maximize him, for him to be a slot, almost a slot exclusive, slot only player. I think JSN is, again, somebody with over 70% success rate versus man coverage and 75% in 2 of the 3.
Yep.
Like, that's not a guy I'm betting against in terms of being able to play outside. Like, we've got proof of concept of him being able to beat man coverage. We've seen the flashes against press coverage. I think with that and the productivity, again, like this, if you don't buy what I'm selling in terms of success rates and reception perception, all that, I mean, I don't know why you're listening to the podcast, but thanks for listening anyways. But again, he put it in the box score. He was the most productive receiver against man coverage from week 10 on last year. Like, we've seen the proof of concept. Like, there's a difference between beating man coverage on the perimeter, but and man coverage in the slot, but like the routes that he's running, we can translate that to an outside receiver role. The other thing too, and this comes back to the offense, this is sort of something that I've been chewing on recently. I talked about this on an episode of Football 301, but I think condensed formations are going to be like one of the talking points in the NFL this year. Not like I'm sitting here saying like, oh, let me break some new theory or something. Everyone knows, like, football dorks know what a condensed formation is. Okay. But just like these offenses off the Shanahan and McVay tree, they use these condensed formations so often. And what I mean by that is just like these receivers are just closer to the line of scrimmage. This is from Next Gen Stats. Like, the teams that have the lowest yard length in terms of terms of the formation width. Yes. It's the Rams, it's the Niners, it's the Lions. That's interesting because this is the other, like, as Ben Johnson and his guys proliferate around the league, they might also make this just less of just a Shanahan and McVay thing. So again, it's Rams, Niners, Lions, Texans, Bobby Slowick, obviously last year, Vikings, Kevin O'Connell, Packers, Matt LaFleur, Falcons, Zach Robinson from the Rams, Buccaneers, Liam Cohen from the Rams, and then Dolphins. Those are all the teams, which obviously Mike McDaniel from the Shanahan tree. Those are all the teams that are fewer than 20, that are 22 or fewer in terms of formation width. The Saints actually were in that ballpark in the early portion of the season. I think that they just kind of lost their way with injuries, and it just, they couldn't do as much of that with those receiver talents that they had there by the end of the season, when it's like Bub Means and MVS and Cedric Wilson or whatever. But Mason just the Tipton. Mason 0 yards per route run against man coverage Tipton. We'll never forget that statistic as long as I live. But anyways, I say all that to say, yeah, I know. I really got to get a life. I say all that to say that this is almost like giving me I wouldn't say I'm having like a full existential crisis about this, but because, in reception perception, I charted slot, outside, left, right, on the line of scrimmage, off the line of scrimmage. There's a little bit of a difference when we're condensing these formations so much that the lines get blurred a little bit between like the flanker receiver and the slot receiver, like the slot receiver being on the line of scrimmage and like right there near the offensive line. so that like think Cooper Kupp can chip in the run game and then release out to the flat, but it also keeps the Z receiver from being pressed, and you still get a lot of like softer zone coverage or off man coverage looks there. So like he can play outside, and he's not necessarily JSN being, he's not going to just be okay. He's going to run routes like George Pickens or something like that, or like an X receiver. There's going to be a lot of ways that they can still make his role almost slot-esque while being more of an outside receiver. So I just think this stuff is, and I think the Seahawks are they're such a good example of this. They're the Bears with Ben Johnson going there. They're another good example of this, is people are like obsessing about who's the slot and who's the outside. Frankly, I think I'm not like trying to dump on the fantasy community here, but I do think that like fantasy analysis is very archaic in terms of we're still just talking about like slot and outside receivers when these lines are so much that it matters a little bit less. And especially matters less for a guy like JSN who has already proved he can beat man coverage at a 75% rate. I'm not going to say I have no concerns about him being an outside receiver, just because like I haven't seen it yet. And whatever, like there's no like true proof of concept in that, hey, here's a whole season of him just being an awesome outside receiver. But my concern level is pretty close to zero.